Rodriguez, President of GDAC, and your moderator. Our purpose and mission is to provide education. We work together with our communities for their protection and for the environment's protection from the exploitative natural gas extraction in the Marcellus Shale region of Northeast Pennsylvania. Recently, proposals for placement of 4 large bore pipelines in Luzerne County have surfaced. It is our intent to provide some information regarding issues concerned with these proposals. Our featured panelists will present issues concerning property values, environmental effects, and legal issues, including eminent domain, associated with these proposals. They will each have 10 minutes to provide their information, and after all 3 presentations, an open question and answer period will follow. We respectfully ask that questions be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes in order to provide maximum participation from the panelists and the audience. We have several of our members passing out index cards with pencils for you folks in case you want to have notes or whether you like to have questions. At the end of the presentations, we'll be happy to gather them and have our spokesman, Dave Thomas, just say, who also happens to be the chairman for our legal and legislative committee, to gather them and to assist you in asking the questions to our panel as well. We would like to start this panel off first by reviewing the testimony given at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission hearing regarding the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline project that was held on August 8th, 2014 at the Lake Lehman High School. This was a clip that's been given to us by our member, Scott Cannon. Scott?
December 13th, another section of the same Williams Company's gas transmission pipeline that failed on May 1st failed in Lewis County, Washington. Gas flowed for 3 hours before being shut off. Gas pressure had already been reduced to 20% on this pipeline after the May 1st explosion. External corrosion and stress corrosion cracking were seen in this failed area. In the fourth quarter 2003, they were fined $20 million in a federal investigation for allegedly reporting false data to manipulate the California natural gas market. In 2008, a natural gas explosion occurred in Appomattox, Virginia. 2 homes were destroyed, damage to approximately 100 other houses, and multiple injuries were a result. The pipeline split just below the maximum allowable operating pressure. That incident resulted in a 2009 fine of $925,000 for failure to monitor corrosion, which caused the explosion. In 2011, Williams was fined $23,000 by the PHMSA for failure to conduct its own annual inspections of compressor stations. That's the PHMSA's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. In 2011, a Williams Transco pipeline ruptured with an explosion in southwestern Alabama. In 2012, March, an explosion at the Lathrop compressor station in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, blows a hole in the roof. 2012 March, Transco Williams was fined $50,000 by PHMSA for failure to follow its own internal policies to control corrosion in natural gas pipeline in New York City. 2012 July, a compressor station operated by Williams Companies in Windsor, New York, was venting gas in a routine procedure during a lightning storm when the vent was ignited by the lightning, causing an explosion and a huge fireball. In 2013, March, Williams natural gas plant leaks benzene, which contaminated groundwater. In some places, the benzene was found to be 36,000 times greater than the levels considered safe for drinking. 2013 March, Williams 24-inch gathering pipeline ruptured in Marshall County, West Virginia. In 2013, a fire in a Williams central compressor station near Montrose, PA. In 2013 May, another fire occurred in a Williams compressor at Branchburg, New Jersey. 13 were injured. In 2013 June, an explosion and fire killed 2 people, injured 114 people at a Williams Geismar natural gas chemical plant in Louisiana. 31,000 pounds of toxic chemicals released. Further investigation revealed that 3 years of noncompliance with Federal Clean Air Act. In 2013, December, Williams Partners were fined $99,000 by OSHA for the Geismar Olefins disaster. In 2014, January, there was a fire at the Windsor, New York compressor station, the second in less than 2 years. In 2014, March, there was a fire and explosion at a Williams LNG facility in Plymouth, Washington. In 2014, April, there was an explosion and a fire in a pipeline supplying a Williams-owned facility in Moundsville, West Virginia. In 2014, April, in Opal, Wyoming, there was an explosion and a fire at a natural gas processing facility and major national pipeline hub. The entire town was evacuated. I'd like to state that the preceding was not an all-inclusive list of the safety and environmental issues as a result of Williams Transco operations and interests. Despite the various serious violations of internal safety standards and federal law, Williams Transco continues to cause environmental, safety, financial, and socioeconomic damage in areas where it currently operates. Using these past specific examples, the probability of future violations is inevitable. Other industries are heavily regulated, and just a small fraction of the incidences that I previously described could result in the loss of licenses and permission to operate. If permission is granted for the Atlantic Sunrise project, FERC should consider pre-planning for all potential resulting issues such as water damage, air damage, and safety concerns. Serious consideration needs to be given by FERC to this laundry list of negative safety and environmental impacts of Williams Transco's current operations. When the proposed Atlantic Sunrise project applications are formally filed, please strongly consider denying approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott and Dory. This just sets the tone. They're asking FERC to deny permits for these pipelines. I take it to you, it's not FERC's real domain here, it's actually your homes, it's your community. So I suggest that it's up to us to start being more vocal, be more active, more proactive in order to try to keep these things at bay. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Joe Fisher, Master of Education, Real Estate Appraisers, Fisher and Fisher Appraisers, Inc., East Stroudsburg. He's an AQB certified USPAP instructor, a Pennsylvania licensed real estate instructor, and a Pennsylvania certified general appraiser who will present property issues associated with pipeline placement. He has continued educating himself on wetlands and has participated in conducting impact studies in various locations, and he has also served as an expert witness in multiple lawsuits. Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A couple of things we have to be concerned about with gas pipelines and gas situations here. The pipeline issue is really a double-edged sword. Typically, a pipeline doesn't cause a heck of a lot of damage to your property value. The pipeline doesn't. And no one incident makes or breaks a market. If they cut your land in half, yes, it's going to cause diminution of value. I was doing a study up in Pike County 2 years ago, and we had a whole ton of information that told me that the pipeline is going to diminish land value. And that was particularly big pieces of land, 1,000 acres, 500 acres, that size piece. Looking around for trying to find houses that have sold with pipelines on them. We found that Dave Chance, one of Dave Chance's salespeople, sold this house. It was about 1950s, early 60s Cape Cod, in nice shape, but of that vintage. When you stepped off the front porch of that pipeline onto the lawn, you were on the easement right on top of that pipeline. It was right next to the house. So I called up to the young lady who sold his house and I said, what was your buyer's reaction to the pipeline in the front yard? She said, they sure was nice that that gas company put all that topsoil and beautiful sod down right in front of the house. That blew my whole idea of diminution in value as far as single-family homes are concerned. If you start talking about large tracts, they'll cut your land in half. We had that in Shahola Township. The pipeline company promised to put a crossing across the pipeline so that they could build houses back in there. I spoke with that gentleman once down in Dallas, Texas. I believe it was Dallas or Houston, I'm not sure which. And we talked and he said, oh yeah, we'll put it in for them, they just tell us where we want it. Several calls and God only knows how many emails later, he never returned one, which tells me he wasn't being totally truthful with me. So we weren't very happy about that one. In another instance up in, again, Pike County, a gentleman owns 1,000 acres of ground. That's a big piece of land. He had 16 lots cut out of that. And we were back in there with an ATV. He was showing me these lots. And the pipeline went right in front of the lots so that they couldn't access these 16 lots. When you looked out over those lots, you were looking back at Pocono Manor in Mount Pocono, and we were up in Pike County in Shahola Township. How do I know that? I lived in Mount Pocono for 17 years. And if you go to what they call the Knob in Mount Pocono, you can look all the way up to High Point, New York. We were up just outside High Point, New York, looking back, and you could see Pocono Manor. Those lots are worth a lot of money. They were 5 acres apiece, and the pipeline, people just put their pipeline right down the middle of it and didn't care. So you gotta be careful when you're dealing with these pipeline people. Sometimes they won't be totally truthful with you. They don't care if they destroy your property values. Now, I watched the video that Scott sent me on that plant, I guess not too far from here. If you have a plant or anything that's creating noise or a disturbance to your property, that's called external depreciation. It's a diminution in value from outside your property boundaries, across the street, down the street, whatever it is. Your problem with that is trying to quantify that damage. The tape that Scott sent me said, people said, I wonder what's happened to my property values. Well, it's going down, there's no question about that. But the problem is, how do you quantify that damage? Is it $100, $1,000, $100,000? What is it? And the only way you can do that, and this is what people don't understand, is we have to find, first we have to identify where similar plants are located. Then we have to find houses that have sold near those similar plants. And you can't use just one. Because if we use just one, then that girl up in Pike County who thought the pipeline was, people were great putting that grass in, that's your market. But one sale doesn't make a market. So we have to find 3, 4, 5, 6 sales of properties near a facility like the one that's down the street here that have sold. Then we've got to find 6 properties like the ones that sold that aren't near such a property, and you'll have a difference. That difference isn't going to be exactly the same. It's going to be a range, 20, 30, 40%, whatever it happens to be. And it's going to be like 20% to 25%, or 30% to 40%, or some such thing. And then we have to look at location. You've all heard the expression location, location, location. I think, you know, you live out here in the back mountain. Property values are a lot higher here on the back mountain than they are in Edwardsville. You people live here, am I right or wrong? Pretty much, I guess, yeah, done a good bit of work in this area. But so you gotta look at the location of the ones that sold without the influence of a plant and the ones that sold with the influence of plants. So there's a whole bunch of juggling acts to be done here. It isn't cheap, it takes a huge amount of time. And that's the big problem, the average homeowner can't afford it. It's not that your appraisers, we want to get rich. If I wanted to get rich, I wouldn't be in the appraisal business. But I have these bad habits. I like to pay my mortgage. I like to have 3 meals a day. You know, I like to buy clothes for me and my family, that kind of thing. We have to be paid for our time. You can't be volunteering months and months at a time. And that's the problem you face. And I don't know, Todd could probably answer you better if there's any way there's any kind of assistance for the homeowner to find out what that diminution in value is. And it depends. Todd and I did one up in Susquehanna County, actually 3 houses. And they wouldn't know any diminution. There was a lot of noise from the plant nearby. And the one guy just used the house, you know, on occasional weekends in the summertime. Another person lived there full time. The third fella was a doctor who was studying to be a surgeon, and this was his respite to study. You can't study when there's a big noise all around you. So his diminution was bigger than the other 2. And again, it's that juggling issue that we all have to deal with. Okay? As far as them putting a pipeline through your property or near it, we had an explosion in Marshall's Creek about 15, maybe 20 years ago. It was at Christmas time, and I was at a Christmas party with some other brokers and a couple of lawyers, and we were looking out across the mountain, and all of a sudden the whole valley lit up. This thing blew up. You could see it. We were probably 25, 30 miles away. Right, so it does occur. If you remember 2 summers ago, I think, the one exploded in Allentown, took out a whole block. That can happen. I was involved with a case over in Wisconsin where a pipeline, before we had a Wetlands Act, they were developing suburbs back in the 60s. And they ran a pipeline underneath the electric line between the Canadian border and the Mexican border right down through the state of Wisconsin, Brookfield, Wisconsin. Lo and behold, somebody in 1990 was digging on that pipeline down in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Nicked the pipeline people went out and looked at it and said it was just a scratch on the surface of the paint. Well, years went by and it started to leak. And it fanned out, nobody realized it because natural gas is heavier than air and has no odor. Nobody knew how long it leaked. But when it found an ignition point, it exploded, and everything, people, animals, houses, plants, everything was instantly incinerated. That was my first experience with a pipeline, and it scared the heart and soul of me. So, you know, it's something you have to be considering after what we just saw here about people that weren't taking care of these things. That's scary. I think if you're going to have something like that coming through this community, you better make sure that somebody's taking care of it. Okay? I got 1 minute to tell me to shut up, so. For that, I'll just let it go. We all need employment, there's no question about it, but we don't need to see our houses blow up, okay? I'll sit down. If you have questions, I'll take them later.
Next, I would like to introduce Sam Kaplinka-Lohr from the outreach team of the Clean Air Council, a nonprofit group dedicated to protecting everyone's right to breathe clean air. Tonight, he will talk about some of the environmental and health issues associated with transmission pipeline infrastructure and compressor stations. Sam?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me back there? Dave, can you hear me in the back? Yeah. All right. So again, my name is Sam Kaplinka-Lair, Clean Air Council, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of the questions about the air quality, environmental, and health impacts from transmission pipelines for you. So I'm going to start off, try and run through the basics of each of these proposed pipelines and delve into some of the environmental and health impacts, and then talk a little bit about the organizing that's been happening so far along each of the pipelines. Just a brief little bit about the Clean Air Council. We are a nonprofit. Most of what we're doing on pipeline campaigns is talking about public education and making sure that landowners and community members have access to the information that they need to know in order to make a decision going forward. So why pipelines? Right now in Luzerne County and this part of Pennsylvania, we're seeing a tremendous build out in pipeline infrastructure, and not just gathering lines or distribution lines of 30 to 42 inch transmission pipelines. And for Luzerne County, most of what we're seeing is it's a gas gateway to the Marcellus production areas, going to national markets and international markets. Right now there are at least 3 export facilities that have been actually accepted so far for shipping liquefied natural gas overseas, and there are over 20 that are currently in the works with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Overseas, companies can get up to 4 times more for natural gas than they can get in the United States, and they are trying every pathway possible to build pipelines to get it overseas. So a quick overview of the 4 pipelines. The first one, the Leidy Southeast Expansion. It just earlier this summer had the environmental assessment from FERC come out. 30 miles of pipeline, 42 inch, 1 billion cubic feet per day. The Atlantic Sunrise is about closer to 200 miles, just about 180 miles total. 30 inch pipeline in this area, and it changes over in Columbia County to be a 42 inch pipeline, 1.7 billion cubic feet per day. Penn East was proposed about a month and a half ago. This is another Williams project, and again, I believe it's proposed to be either 30 or 42, another billion cubic feet per day. So you're seeing just tremendous volumes of gas that companies are trying to put through Luzerne County. And finally, Diamond East. This is in the open season right now, which is basically means that Williams is looking for bidders on the gas, anybody who wants to buy it. And that will determine both how much pipeline they need to put in, what size of the pipeline, and how much compression. Impacts to the air. Every step of natural gas extraction and transmission has air quality impacts. From the wellhead to when it's actually burned at a power plant or in somebody's home, there are air quality impacts, both from fugitive emissions, which are leaks that are part of the process in terms of pipelines and compressor stations, as well as the energy required to compress the gas. So at compressor stations, you'll have natural gas engines more likely than not, and all of those engines, those compressor stations have air quality impacts just to compress the gas. A study that came out earlier this month found that the leakage rates are actually probably a lot higher than what the industry has stated so far. Upwards of 9 to 10% of the actual amount that's being extracted from the ground is leaking to the atmosphere. Some of the health impacts from Marcellus Shale, both extraction and transportation, are delineated here. We have this on our website, cleanair.org, and it's pretty numerous in terms of the health impacts to the lungs, to the brain, digestive system, to the immune system. Basically, all of the bodily systems are impacted by the pollutants that come out through compressor stations, as well as during the extraction process and the chemicals that are used during hydraulic fracturing. So to give you an idea of a typical large-scale compressor station, I pulled some of the information for a compressor station that was proposed on the Algonquin pipeline, which kind of goes east from Pennsylvania. And this is for the Stony Point compressor station. You can see some of these numbers, like 203 tons per year of VOCs. It's kind of hard to get an idea of what that actually means. So what I've done is compared that to idling diesel school buses to give you an idea of, for if you take one particular pollutant like carbon monoxide, what a typical 42-inch compressor station would emit in terms of carbon monoxide. So just taking carbon monoxide, it would equal the emissions from 444 constantly idling diesel school buses 24/7. If you pulled a different pollutant like particulate matter or nitrogen oxide or VOCs, it would equal different amounts. So that gives you a sense of the expected emissions from one of these compressor stations. The impacts to the land. I believe it was in 2011 when the Nature Conservancy put out an estimated impact from pipeline to land acreage throughout Pennsylvania. And they calculated that between 60,000 and 150,000 acres of land would be impacted by pipelines in the next 20 years if it continues at pace. This exacerbates existing forest fragmentation in Pennsylvania, which is already a large issue. And whenever you have a pipeline come through a forest, it converts it basically from interior forest to field and exterior forest. And the impact to hunting and to the animals that particularly have migratory pathways is tremendous. Last, in terms of agricultural impacts, when you have gas in a pipeline that's 3 feet underground, which is the regulated requirements for transmission pipeline depth, it creates a tremendous amount of heat just from the friction of the gas going through the pipeline. And that increases the soil temperature on top of it. So what a lot of farmers have begun to see on top of these transmission pipelines is that their crop yields are different because they have the amount of moisture in the soil is a lot less than adjacent plots that don't have the pipeline. In terms of the impacts to rivers and streams, when you're going through a watershed with a pipeline, there are generally two types of stream crossings that pipeline companies use. One is horizontal directional drilling, which is they drill underneath the stream, and that's more expensive. And the type that they use more often is called an open cut, which is they use a cofferdam to dry out half of the stream bed and put the pipeline in that half and then flip it over and do it on the other half. The impacts in terms of erosion and sedimentation in the rivers and streams, and also just the impact to fish that use that area for spawning is tremendous. Taking a moment to look at the Pennsylvania Constitution, Pennsylvania is rather unique in actually having protections for clean air and water in the Constitution. So just to read from section 27 here. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. Right now, what we're seeing in this part of Pennsylvania is the conversion of what used to be a lot of preserved lands into extraction zones. And I don't know if you've heard that term before, but Pennsylvania, in many respects, is becoming an extraction zone for natural gas. So far, there are 9,000 wells, and the industry's stated goal is 100,000 wells. In the eastern part of Pennsylvania alone, we see over 10 massive transmission pipelines, and that's 30 to 42 inch in diameter. And if the industry's stated goal is to get to 100,000 wells, it begs the question, how many more pipelines are we going to see? All right, so transitioning a little bit, how much time do I have left? Okay, all right, so I'm going to try and, this will be brief, but we can come back to it. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is the approval body for all of these pipelines, and mostly what FERC does is, it's never really seen a pipeline project that it doesn't like. So if it actually gets that far, it's most likely that they are going to move forward with approving these projects. However, in the meantime, you can get on record with FERC, it's completely free, all of your objections, and that is on the record so that you can intervene in the process, which is a legal process we can talk a little bit more about, and that maintains your right to appeal the decision of FERC. And the main thing going forward, the last little bullet point here is know your rights. As landowners, as community members, you actually have a lot of power early on in this process. The Commonwealth Pipeline was proposed a few years back, and the company withdrew their application because of the number of landowners that refused surveying, that refused access to their property because there was public outcry. You actually have a fair amount of power early on. If it gets further on, then it's more and more likely that FERC will approve the project. So the last slide here is organizing. And the materials on the front table there's a petition to the Delaware River Basin Commission to ask them to use their jurisdiction regarding Penn East. And there's also denial of permission letters for Penn East, and we have on our website for Atlantic Sunrise. So these are all tools that you can use along with petitions to organize as a community going forward and really leverage the power that you have early on in the process to either try and stop it or get the most money possible.
Now, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Attorney Todd O'Malley from the offices of O'Malley and Langen of Scranton, who will address legal issues, including eminent domain. He is a dedicated, experienced attorney and Scranton native who stands up for people's rights. And as always, welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Al. And thank all of you for your commitment to your community. I always enjoy being down at a GDAC meeting because I see so many people that care so much, and it's great to see, because we get up into Bradford County and over in Lycoming County, you find there are communities that bad things are happening. The people are sitting on their hands saying, so what? We don't see that here. Your legal rights. Number one, I think Sam said it best. You don't let these people on your property for anything. You have that right. They don't have the power of eminent domain presently. They want it. They're fighting real bad to get it. But you don't have to allow a survey of your property. You don't have to allow, I think they're calling them now environmental impact studies. And we just got a letter from one of our clients that got a phone message. Oh, by the way, can we come up? There's going to be a pipeline near your property and we want to do an environmental study. No. Don't come near us. The people that they hire to negotiate these pipelines, as far as I'm concerned, are nothing short of scallywags. They are people that aren't licensed by anyone. They're not realtors. They're not like Mr. Fisher, who has to take an examination. They are salespeople. And their job is to get you to give up as much of your property for as little money as possible. Don't talk to them. You don't have to. Now, what is the power of eminent domain? The state of Pennsylvania and the federal government has the authority to come in and take your property under certain circumstances. Electric utilities, if they have to put a power line through and it's a electric utility that's going to provide electricity to the whole community, they have the power of eminent domain. The highway department, they have the power of eminent domain. Gas companies that are intrastate have the power of eminent domain. But these interstate gas companies that are doing nothing but bringing the gas from one point in the Marcellus region down to the Delaware Bay so they can ship it on a boat, get it through the Panama Canal and over to Asia or across the Atlantic and over to Europe, they don't have the right of eminent domain presently. Surprise, surprise, our former Secretary of the Department of Environmental Affairs, or Environmental Protection, Michael Krancer, is now a lawyer for Blank Rome, big law firm in Philadelphia, and they have an application before the Public Utility Commission for the common good to, in fact, do a request for the power of eminent domain. They don't have it yet. If they did, they would come in, and if they ever get it, understand what your rights are. They will knock on your door and say, we are going to take your property under eminent domain, and we're filing in the courthouse what's called a declaration of taking. And that declaration of taking spells out how much land they're going to be taking, how they're going to do it, and they have to offer you just compensation. That just compensation is going to be 50 times less than they should be paying you. You don't have to take it. You can ask for a hearing before what's called the Board of View. The Board of View are 3 citizens from the community that sit on a board, and they hear cases. Someone like Joe Fisher comes in, and a guy like me, and says they've only offered $5,000. Joe's going to tell you that they should be offering $50,000. And if they don't pay it, the Board of View then ends up making the decision, okay, this is the right number. It's not over then. If you wish, you can take an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas, and we do it all over again, except in that case, it's a jury trial. And almost always, the juries award more money than the Board of View does. Quite frankly, jurors don't like the idea that our states have the ability to take your property. So you go to a jury trial and you can get more. Not only that, but there is interest and counsel fees that can be awarded too. Eminent domain does have some rights, but without eminent domain, you have all the power. If you don't lease your property to the pipeline company to allow an easement to go through, then you are totally protected, and you can tell them to pound sand. And I think, as you pointed out, when a community is well organized, they just can't get their pipelines through. Am I right, Sam? I mean, that's just plain simple. You can put up roadblocks every step of the way. Now, how do you do that? Just what we're doing tonight. You organize, you talk to your neighbors, you make sure everybody understands the dangers of these pipelines. No one who lives up near the Chapin dehydration station had any conception how bad that station was going to be for them. We had some people that attended the township meeting when the building permits were given out, and questions were asked about noxious fumes and other problems, and time again, the people from PVR lied to the local municipality to make sure they got that station in. And it's true in one compressor station after another. Sam, how many of these meetings do you see the same thing? People go in, they ask questions, and they're told, no problem, it's not going to be a problem at all, don't worry about it. So I guess the point I'm trying to make for you is be aware, pass the word, understand that these pipelines are going to impact the property value that you have. And Joe right now may not know how it negatively impacts properties, but I'll tell you what, after we get a few more of these pipeline projects through, he's going to see, I am sure, that property after property after property that's allowed a pipeline to go through has lost the value and lost the ability to sell and sometimes even mortgage their properties. So stand up, be available, and don't take the gas company's word for anything. They really are very greedy, and there's billions of dollars below our feet that they want to get into their pockets and line their shareholders' pockets as well. Don't allow them to do it, because it's going to impact your ability to sell your property. Just one example, I represented a car dealership up in Carbondale, and it wasn't a pipeline, it was a sewer line that 10 years before they took, through the power of eminent domain, the sewer line and they lost it for all intents and purposes. They filed for a board of view, and their cousin was representing them, and for about 10 years, nothing happened, and he came to our firm. And what we were able to establish is he could never expand the size of his dealership. And today, people want larger enclosed dealerships. As a result, the Board of View made an award to him of a significant amount of money when we went to a jury trial and brought in a realtor to say, this is going to impact his ability to have that dealership for the next, for as long as he has it, and he won't be able to sell the dealership, and we were able to get more money. But no one in their right mind ever thought that a sewer line going through the parking lot of a car dealership would impact the value of the car dealership that bad. It truly did. I've only got a minute left, and my advice to you is be active, talk to your neighbors, and if in fact there are pipelines that go through, you do have the ability to sue the gas company and the pipeline company for the nuisance they create. And the first nuisance case was reported back in England. It's the first reported case that we have in the Anglo-Saxon system. And that case held that a pig farmer caused the nuisance to his neighbors, and as a result, they were awarded damages. So when they start coming through with the heavy equipment and all those things, you can also file nuisance claims. And this is one way to let them know that you're going to fight all the way through. Thank you very much, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you to all panelists. If you have any questions, we will open the floor for discussion. Please, if you have any questions on the cards, give them to our spokesman, Dave Thomas, so that he doesn't have the accent I have, so at least he'll be able to read them a lot better than I would.
All right, good evening. And if as we're going through these questions, you come up with a question, feel free to write it up and send it up, and we'll try to get through all of these this evening. So what I'll do is I'll read the question, and I'll throw it out to the panel in one and or all can respond however appropriate. So what I'll do is I'll start out now. The first question is, I have a Williams pipeline on my property with a 30-foot easement. Can another company put an additional pipeline in, and can Williams come on my property without permission or notice? Panel?
We met a realtor out in western Pennsylvania who purchased her property and found out that there was a pipeline that was only about 18 or 24 inches. And she found that the gas company was able to come through that easement that had been given and increase the size of the pipeline. So I hate to tell you, but in my opinion, you're going to have a tough fight to stop them, but you should take it. You file an injunction against them to stop them from coming on your property. And there may be some opportunity. You'd need to look at the lease or the easement that was given to the first pipeline that was there.
In terms of the actual easement language, and maybe you can speak to this as well, but in whatever contract they come to you with, you can ensure that they only This is only slated for one pipeline and only of this particular diameter, only transporting this amount of gas. No more pipelines shall go through this easement without further negotiations. Those are all contract issues. And I would say, though, that in terms of negotiation, you're years away at this point on a lot of these pipeline projects from eminent domain, from negotiation. Negotiation is ultimately something that should happen right at the very end, if at all. Like at the beginning, you have the most potential to really show a dramatic opposition here if you don't want the pipelines. If you do want it, that's a different issue. But if you don't want them, you're in good company, and there are people organizing all along the entire route to say, no way, not this pipeline, not any other pipeline.
The one key, and I see this almost every day, somebody gets a proposal for something from the sewer company, from the gas company, from whatever it happens to be. They read this, but they don't really understand what they're doing. If anybody approaches you, the first thing you want to do is call an attorney. Don't try to do it yourself. Get legal advice, or you're going to be in trouble. And if you don't get legal advice, the horse is a mile down the pike when you close the barn door. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Next question. Where is the metal pipe created? Such as which country, or is it American made? And if out of country, is there accountability for the integrity of the metal? And will you negotiate a, in quotes, farm tap for our compensation of loss of land?
There's no law stopping that, farm tap.
I can speak to the pipeline issue. It depends on the company. First of all, a lot of the pipes are Chinese made, made overseas. However, some companies have committed to using X percentage of American made pipes, and it depends on the company. And you can go online and research to figure out what they've committed to in terms of actually sourcing their pipes from American made steel.
The only thing I could say to that is, would there be a loss in value? Then the question is, it depends. You don't know until we actually research every aspect of it.
That
You
would
can't
be
just...
an incredible perk. It's an incredible perk because it's unregulated gas, and it is known as a farm tap. It's totally available.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear everything you said, ma'am.
A farm tap is available. It happens all across our country now, and it is unregulated. We're unmetered, I'm sorry. It uses the regulator coming to your home, but it's unmetered. So it's indefinite. Like you could put up other structures even on your home and put that pipeline going to the other structures.
What the point that I'm trying to make is,
For
as an
just
appraiser...
compensation, and I think that's extremely valuable if the people did that at least on their property through negotiation.
Oh, and you may have a point. The point you have to understand as an appraiser, as a licensed person, as Todd's licensed and I'm licensed, we can't just throw a dart. We have to have proof. You know, I'm not allowed to throw a dart and say, I think it's this or I think it's that. I say to my students all the time, and I teach appraisal courses and real estate courses. Methinks belongs in Shakespeare, not in real estate. So you can't just throw a dart and say, I think it's this or I think it's that. You'll lose your license for that. We have to prove it.
My own value, I would find that extremely valuable.
So if you are going to have the pipeline on your property, it's something that you can negotiate in, you can get a farm tap, and then you'll have free gas, is what you say.
Yeah, that's where you need legal advice to help you with negotiations.
Because there are some people who are doing it, and there are some that are against it.
In our area.
And the question that I would have, that you need to know, is who maintains that farm tap and how long will it be maintained for? And if something happens on the farm tap, who's responsible? And quite frankly, I am sure that they will write a lease to make sure that you are responsible and that you must maintain it after a certain period of time. They are not generous people.